I can still recall the night I almost died at work. It was the fall of 2016 in rural Oklahoma, and I was a 19-year-old working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station off a lonely highway. Up until that night, my shifts had been uneventful. I thought I knew what to expect from the midnight hours. Mostly boredom, a few lonely travelers stopping by. Nothing I couldn't handle. I was wrong. On that October night, the highway was deserted and the neon OP-in sign buzzed faintly in the window. Inside, the only sounds were the low hum of refrigerators and the rustle of pages as I flipped through a magazine to stay awake. Around 2:00 a.m., I felt a wave of loneliness. Midnight shifts are usually quiet, but something about that night felt different. A heavy, uneasy silence hung in the air, and I found myself peering out the window, expecting I don't know what. Earlier that week, my coworker Tom had joked that the gas station was haunted by a man who died on the highway years ago. I'd laughed it off then, focused on real worries like petty crime or staying awake. But as the night wore on and the silence grew thicker, Tom's story crept back into my mind. Every clank of the ice machine or flicker of the fluorescent lights made me jump. I told myself I was being silly, letting a spooky tale get to me. Around 2:30 a.m., the phone behind the counter rang, a jarring trill that made me nearly drop my magazine. We almost never get calls that late. Hesitantly, I picked up. "Hello, Speedway Gas," I said, trying to sound confident. No answer, just static and a faint crackling that almost sounded like breathing. A chill crept over me. "Hello," I repeated, my voice smaller. Still nothing, just that soft static. I hung up, telling myself it was a prank or a glitch, yet my hands trembled as I set the receiver down. The quiet in the store felt even heavier after that call. I took a deep breath and decided to busy myself restocking shelves to calm my nerves. I was crouched in the snack aisle, stacking chips on the bottom shelf, when I heard it. The faint crunch of gravel outside, like footsteps near the side of the building. I froze. Customers always park in front and use the main door, so footsteps by the side were unusual. My first thought was that someone pulled off the highway to use the outdoor restroom on the side of the building. But anyone needing it would have come in for the key, and no one had come inside. Heart thudding, I stood and crept toward the glass front doors. I peered out, but saw nothing. No car, no person. The parking lot was empty, lit by the fluorescent awning lights and a lone street lamp by the road. Gathering my courage, I stepped outside into the chilly autumn air. The night was silent except for a few distant crickets. I inched along the side of the building toward the restrooms. Nobody. The gravel was undisturbed. Maybe I had imagined the footsteps, or maybe it was an animal. There were stray dogs and coyotes around these parts. Exhaling, I scolded myself for being jumpy. Still, as I went back in, I double-checked that the restroom was locked and the back door to the stockroom was bolted. It was nearing 3:00 a.m. when a vehicle finally appeared. Headlights in the distance grew brighter until a pickup truck pulled into our lot. Relieved to see another person, I stood behind the counter, hoping for a customer to break the monotony. The truck idled by pump number 2, but nobody stepped out to pump gas or come inside. I watched, waiting. Through the windshield, I could just make out a figure in the driver's seat. Whoever it was just sat there, engine running. The hairs on my arms pricked up. Why would someone drive to a gas station at 3 a.m. and not get out? After maybe a minute, the truck turned off its lights and slowly rolled back onto the highway. No gas, no purchase, just gone. I was alone again, the road once more empty. My uneasy feeling deepened. Maybe it was just a lost driver changing their mind, I tried to reason. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been washed. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hoping the warmth would steady my nerves. I kept telling myself there were logical explanations. Prank calls happen, animals wander, drivers get spooked or lost. But I was on edge now. I found myself constantly glancing at the security monitor's grainy feed of the pumps outside. Nothing unusual appeared on the screen, yet I couldn't relax. Around 3:15 a.m., as I took a sip of coffee, the power suddenly went out. The lights, the humming coolers, the buzzing sign, everything flickered off, plunging the store into darkness. My heart leaped into my throat. I stood there for a moment, stunned in the blackness. The highway outside was pitch dark now. Our station had been the only light for miles. I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight, pulse racing. Power outages weren't unheard of, but the weather was calm and clear. Why now? I thought of Tom's ghost story and shivered, but forced the thought away. This had to be a coincidence. Using my phone's glow, I made my way to the back stockroom where the circuit breakers were. Only a dim red glow from the emergency exit sign lit the cluttered room. I navigated past shelves and boxes until I found the electrical panel. With shaking fingers, I flipped the main breaker. To my relief, the lights blinked back on. I let out a long breath of relief. I stepped back into the store, glad the power was back, until I noticed the front door. It was wide open. I was sure I'd closed it when I returned from outside earlier. I hadn't heard the door chime, and it usually chimes whenever the door opens. Yet there it was ajar, a cold breeze fluttering one of the maps on the display rack by the entrance. A spike of adrenaline hit me. Someone must be inside. My eyes swept over the aisles and the cooler section at the back. Nothing moved, but I felt an undeniable presence. The bright fluorescents, which moments ago were comforting, now felt harsh. I suddenly felt exposed in the middle of the store. I eased forward and gently shut the door, my hand shaking on the glass. Locking it crossed my mind, but if someone was already in here, that would just trap us together. I slipped behind the counter and quietly retrieved the wooden baseball bat the manager kept there for security after a past robbery attempt. Its solid weight in my hands gave me a hint of courage. "Hello," I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. My voice echoed in the silence. "We're closed for maintenance," I lied. "You need to leave." Only my own words hung in the air. I began moving from behind the counter, gripping the bat tightly as I stepped toward the aisles. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I called, "This isn't funny. Come out now." No response. Halfway down the first aisle, I caught a flicker of movement, a shadow that didn't belong. Over by the end of the beverage aisle, something ducked out of sight. My mouth went dry. Someone was definitely hiding there, behind the racks. I gripped the bat so hard it hurt. Every instinct screamed at me not to go nearer. I didn't want to confront this person. I wanted to get out, to find help. In a surge of desperation, I bolted. I spun on my heel and sprinted back toward the front door. If I could just get outside, I thought, I could run or scream for help or jump into my car. I made it around the counter, nearly reaching the door, when a figure lunged at me from the side. A man burst out from the end of the aisle, charging straight toward me. I saw him only for an instant. A tall man in filthy jeans and a dark hoodie, face pale and eyes wide and crazed. In his hand, a glint of metal, a knife. I screamed and swung the bat wildly. It whooshed through empty air. I missed him. He crashed into me at full speed. We slammed against the floor hard. My head smacked the linoleum, pain exploding in my skull. The bat flew from my hands. His body weight pressed me down as he tried to pin me. His breathing was ragged, furious. I thrashed and kicked, managing to roll to the side, but his hand clamped onto my leg. I felt a hot slice of pain as his knife grazed my calf, cutting through my work pants into flesh. Crying out, I kicked with my free leg, blindly connecting with his shoulder or face. I couldn't tell. He grunted and his grip slackened. Seizing the moment, I tore myself away and scrambled on all fours toward the door. My injured leg screamed with pain, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Behind me, I heard him cursing, scrambling to get up. I barreled through the door, nearly falling on the concrete outside. I ran. I didn't dare look back. I could hear his footsteps close behind. My car was around the side, but there was no time to reach it and get it started. Instead, I sprinted toward the highway, hoping against hope to find help or at least get away from him. The cold night air burned in my lungs, and the wound on my leg throbbed with each step. He was faster. His footsteps grew louder, closer. In seconds, he would be on me again. Terror, like I'd never known, gripped me, the certainty that I was about to die alone on this empty stretch of road. Then, out of nowhere, a miracle. Headlights appeared down the highway. Fast. A car was coming. And as it got closer, I saw the unmistakable flash of red and blue lights on top. A police cruiser. I have never felt such relief in my life. The patrol car must have spotted me, or maybe it was just luck. The cruiser swerved off the road and into the gas station lot, gravel spraying as it came to a halt, its spotlight flooding the area. My pursuer skidded to a stop, blinded by the sudden lights. For a heartbeat, he stood in the open, a gaunt, wild-eyed figure caught in the police spotlight, frozen in the cruiser's glare. Then he turned and bolted into the darkness around the side of the building, vanishing into the shadows and trees beyond. The police officer, a state trooper, threw open his door, hand on his gun. I stumbled towards him, sobbing that there was a man with a knife. The trooper shouted for me to stay behind him, then radioed for backup as he cautiously moved toward the side of the building where the man had fled, flashlight cutting through the dark. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived, red and blue lights flashing across the lot. One officer stayed with me on the curb, and seeing my leg bleeding badly, called for an ambulance. It felt surreal, sitting there under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station, watching officers sweep the area with guns drawn. I kept thinking, this can't be real. They didn't find the man. He had disappeared into the dark. They found muddy footprints behind the store that led nowhere. Later, detectives told me the gas station's phone line had been cut, explaining the static call, and the power likely shut off from outside to lure me out. The pickup truck was likely his. He was checking I was alone. The most terrifying part is wondering how long he had been watching. Maybe he lurked in the darkness when I stepped out, or watched through the window as I stocked shelves, waiting for the perfect moment to slip inside. Knowing someone planned this still makes my skin crawl. I gave my statement and went to the hospital for stitches. I quit the gas station the very next day. They never caught him. Weeks later, Tom told me police arrested a man for attacking another late-night clerk in a nearby town, and he suspected it was the same guy. All I know is I still get nightmares about that night. Sometimes I jolt awake thinking I hear gravel crunch or a phone crackling with static, and I have to remind myself I'm safe, that it's over. I don't work overnight shifts anymore, and I don't think I ever will. Once you come face to face with true horror in the dead of night, you learn that the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters at all, but the very real people who lurk in the darkness. Midnight Horror Stories. Story 2. It was the winter of 2018 in northern Michigan, and the snow had been coming down steadily for hours. I was 27 at the time, working as an overnight dispatcher for a small-town taxi company. The office was in an old, drafty building downtown, right above a closed thrift store. Midnight shifts were usually uneventful, calls here and there from bar patrons or late shift workers, but the snowstorm had slowed business to a crawl. By 11:45 p.m., I had only dispatched one ride all night. That night, my co-dispatcher called out sick, which meant I was completely alone in the office. I didn't mind at first. The heater rattled in the corner, my coffee was hot, and the sound of snow tapping against the window was oddly calming. The streets outside were deserted, and the only light came from the lone lamppost at the corner, its glow swallowed by the swirling flakes. I remember glancing at the wall clock, 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes to midnight. I was jotting down the mileage from the last driver's trip when the office phone rang. The old rotary-style phone had a harsh metallic ring that always startled me. I picked up and said, "Main Street Taxi. How can I help you?" There was a pause. Then, a man's voice, deep, slow, and deliberate, said, "Don't hang up. You have less than an hour." At first, I thought it was a prank. "What is this? Do you need a taxi?" I asked, trying to sound annoyed instead of rattled. The voice didn't answer my question. Instead, it repeated in exactly the same tone, "Less than an hour. Don't hang up." Something about the way he spoke, calm but with an edge, made my skin crawl. I hung up. I figured if it was important, they'd call back. 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. Same number on the caller ID, just a string of zeros. I didn't answer right away this time. I let it ring, hoping they'd give up. On the fourth ring, the noise abruptly stopped. Relieved, I turned back to my computer. But then, from somewhere inside the building, I heard a faint thump. Not like a pipe or the heater. It sounded intentional. A dull impact, as if something, or someone, had dropped a heavy object on the floor. I froze. The thrift store downstairs was closed, and I was the only one with access to this building at night. I got up, listening hard. The sound didn't repeat. I told myself it could be snow sliding off the roof, or maybe the old building settling in the cold. At exactly midnight, the phone rang again. This time, I answered, my voice sharper. "Listen, whoever this is." The man interrupted me, speaking the same slow, deliberate way. 47 minutes. He's closer now. I felt a wave of cold pass through me that had nothing to do with the winter air. "Who's closer?" I asked, but the line went dead. At that point, I should have called the police, but I kept telling myself it was just some sick joke. Besides, the snowstorm had made response time slow. If I called, they'd probably arrive after the caller had gotten bored and moved on. 15 minutes later, I heard another thump, this time directly below me, in the thrift store. The floorboards in the office creaked softly under my feet as I stood, straining to listen. Then came the slow, unmistakable sound of footsteps, deliberate, steady, moving across the shop floor beneath me. I grabbed the old aluminum flashlight from the desk drawer and crept to the office door, which opened into a narrow hallway. The stairwell to the thrift store was at the far end. The building was silent now, except for the faint howl of the wind outside. I opened the door a crack and aimed my flashlight beam down the hallway. Nothing. The stairs were dark. Then my phone, my personal cell this time, buzzed in my pocket. It was an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. The same voice, low and measured. 30 minutes. He's inside. My breath caught. "Who is? What are you talking about?" I demanded, but the call had already ended. This time, I locked the office door. I pulled my chair back so it was against the wall, far from the door, and just listened. Every creak, every groan of the old building made me jump. The heater clanged once, and I nearly screamed. 20 minutes passed, no more calls. I started to think maybe the prank was over, that I'd just been spooked by coincidence and bad timing. Then came a new sound, the slow scrape of metal against metal. It was coming from the hallway, right outside the office door. Someone was trying to unlock it. My throat went dry. The lock rattled softly, like they were testing it. I grabbed the phone on the desk and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered that someone was trying to break into my office. Even as I spoke, the rattling stopped. Footsteps moved away, slow, deliberate, down the hall. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, and that an officer was on the way. Minutes dragged like hours. At one point, I thought I heard the footsteps again, this time in the stairwell, and then a faint creak directly below me. When the police finally arrived, they checked the thrift store and the rest of the building. No one was there. But on the office door, just below the knob, was a fresh gouge in the wood, like someone had pressed a thin blade or pick into it. trying to force the lock. They took my statement, and one of the officers stayed until my shift ended at 6 a.m. The calls, they said, were likely made through an internet service that masked the number. They couldn't trace them. To this day, I don't know who the man on the phone was, or who he meant by he. All I know is that every time I work alone at night, when the clock nears midnight, I still get that same creeping feeling, like someone's counting down again. Midnight Horror Stories. Story 3. It was the summer of 2021 in rural West Virginia when I took the midnight maintenance shift at an isolated rest stop off I-79. The job was simple: keep the place clean, stock supplies, and make sure nothing broke overnight. I thought it would be quiet, just me, a vending machine hum, and the occasional trucker stopping for coffee. I didn't realize I was signing up for the longest, most terrifying night of my life. The rest stop sat in a pocket of darkness between two small towns. No houses, no streetlights, just thick woods pressing in on all sides. During the day, it felt peaceful. At night, though, the trees became a wall of shadows, and the silence outside seemed too deep, like it was waiting for something. I'd been working there about 3 weeks when it happened. It was a Wednesday night, just after 11:50 p.m., and I was restocking paper towels in the men's restroom. The air was thick with summer humidity, even inside, and the buzzing overhead light made the tiled room feel like a box. I had just finished and was heading back toward the janitor's closet when I heard a faint tapping sound. 3 quick knocks, coming from the glass door of the lobby. I figured it was a late-night traveler wanting inside. I glanced over and saw a man standing just outside the glass, half lit by the dim interior lights. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a faded denim jacket. He stood perfectly still, his head tilted slightly, as if watching me. Even from a distance, something about the way he stood made my stomach knot. I started toward the door to unlock it, but halfway there, I froze. The lobby door was never locked. Rest stops are open 24/7, so why was he knocking instead of just coming in? I slowed my pace, instincts telling me to be careful. When I was still about 10 feet from the door, the man suddenly stepped backward into the shadows. I hurried to the glass, peering out, but he was gone. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no people. I even stepped outside onto the concrete walkway, scanning the area. Nothing but the faint hiss of insects in the night. Trying to shake it off, I went back inside. I told myself he must have been dropped off by someone and wandered off to the vending machines, but a quick check showed those were empty too. The unease lingered. Around 12:10 a.m., I was in the back storage room when the power flickered and the lights dimmed to a dull orange for about 5 seconds before returning to full brightness. The rest stop had backup systems, so total blackouts were rare, but I still didn't like it. Power dips in the middle of nowhere tend to stir the imagination. I went to check the breaker panel in the maintenance hallway. Everything was fine. No tripped switches. Still, I decided to make another sweep of the building, just to reassure myself. That's when I noticed something on the lobby floor near the main entrance, a small wet footprint. It was fresh, shiny in the fluorescent light, about a size 10 with distinct tread marks. I knelt to touch it. Still damp. Someone had been inside. My pulse quickened. I scanned the lobby. The rest stop wasn't huge. 2 restrooms, a vending area, a couple of hallways leading to storage and utility rooms. It didn't take long to check each space. Nobody. Still uneasy, I went back to the janitor's closet to grab the radio and call the highway patrol. That's when I noticed the mop bucket had been moved. I'd left it inside the closet earlier, but now it was sitting just outside in the hallway. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't something that could slide out on its own. I told myself maybe I'd left it there absent-mindedly, but I knew I hadn't. Someone had touched it. I keyed the radio and called dispatch. They said they'd send a trooper to swing by, but with 2 incidents already in the county, it could take up to 40 minutes. I didn't like the idea of waiting, but I wasn't about to walk outside into the pitch-black lot. I locked the lobby doors. Not standard procedure, but I wasn't taking chances, and stayed near the front desk where I could see most of the building on the security monitors. The cameras were old, grainy, but good enough to catch movement. For the next 10 minutes, everything was quiet. Then, at 12:27 a.m., something moved on camera 4, the one covering the vending area. It was just a flicker at first, a shadow crossing the floor. I leaned closer to the monitor, rewinding the feed. It was a man, tall, in a denim jacket, walking casually between the machines. No sound, no sign of him on the lobby camera, which meant he'd come from the restroom hallway. The same man from outside. My heart pounded as I grabbed the phone to call 911. As it rang, I kept my eyes on the vending area monitor. The man stopped between two machines, turned toward the camera, and just stood there. Even in the blurry footage, I could see his head tilt slightly, the same way he had outside. Then the phone line went dead, cut to a flat tone. I swore under my breath, switched to the radio, and called again for immediate assistance. No answer, just static. I decided to retreat to the storage room in the back. It had a solid metal door and no windows. I grabbed the radio, a flashlight, and my box cutter, then made my way through the side hallway. Halfway there, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps behind me. Not running, just steady, unhurried steps. I turned, shining the flashlight down the hall, but it was empty. The sound stopped. I backed into the storage room, locked the door, and killed the light. I sat there in the dark, straining to hear. Minutes passed. Then, faintly, I heard the handle jiggle. Once, twice, followed by that same slow tapping sound. 3 knocks, like before. My breathing grew shallow. I pressed my back against the shelves, willing myself to stay silent. After a long moment, the tapping stopped. I didn't hear him walk away. Just nothing. 20 minutes later, the state trooper finally arrived. I stayed locked in until I heard him call out my name. When I emerged, shaking, we searched the building top to bottom. Nothing. But in the vending area, we found something chilling. A single wet footprint, identical to the one in the lobby. It was pointed toward the security camera, as if left there on purpose. The trooper took my statement, but there wasn't much else to do. No signs of forced entry, no damage. Whoever it was either slipped out before I locked the doors, or never intended to leave a trace. I never saw him again, but I quit the job the next day. Now, every time I drive past that rest stop, I can't help but glance toward the lobby windows, half expecting to see that denim jacket and tilted head staring back.